So, in the last episode I finally managed to make my first Trench Crusade Warband. Well, in theory. Short after I dropped this video I realized that for skirmish battles you need to spend 900 points, not just 700. That means my warband wasn't really complete, but I filled that gap pretty easily. Added one pilgrim with sniper rifle, which required only to add simple scope for label rifle, one pilgrim with standard, I used already printed Freya with a book, one pilgrim with musical instruments, church knocker to be more specific, and two pilgrims with submachine guns, which was only real work to do. Now I can finally say that my band is finished. Thing is, I can't play the game with only one warband obviously, especially with a lack of friends around. But in the same time I didn't have enough free time to make new warband from scratches. And that's one reason I decided to make Elite team group as small as possible based on my existing 3D sculpts. On my hard drive there is a lot of different knights, so technically it was kinda reasonable to make Principality of New Antioch this time. In that case I would have two good kinda factions. That's not bad thing, obviously, but one thing I really love in tabletop wargaming is possibility to compare with each other different archetypes. Like good with evil, melee with range, quality with quantity, yeah, especially that last one. And because of my first warband was based on range weapons and big numbers, perfect solution in that case would be Elite force with melee archetype. So I chose Cult of the Black Grail. First look at the roster made me pleased. I found this massive guy called Amalgam for 150 ducats with free weapon slots. I gave him Viscera Cannon, I have no idea how to read it, Black Grail specific gear and two Putrid shotguns, which increased price of my Amalgam to 240 ducats. It is a lot, like for real. Quarter of an army to be more specific. And oh, believe me, I would even add him some additional stuff if it wouldn't forbidden by rules. But still, he couldn't fight alone. I added Lord of Tumors with some melee equipment and one Black Grail Knight. At that stage cost of the warband reached to 600 ducats, but I stopped. I didn't really like how it was going. That team was absolute mess with no background or any logic behind. And what was even worse, there was still a lot of 3D work to do to accomplish such project. Amalgam, Knight, Lord of Tumors, they are really big, complicated characters, and at that point I had sculptures for maybe half of a night. So I started looking for better solution and I found it pretty damn quick. Under basic rules for Black Grail faction, there is one additional sub-faction called, oh my god, how I would read that?
Dirge.
Dirge of the Great Hegemony. And what surprised me in that one is that army is really different from main faction because of unit limitations. In Dirge sub-faction you cannot take any Amalgam or Lord of Tumors. You may ask, how you wanna build Elite warband if you lose two most expensive characters? Well, you get something in return. Something really interesting, I would say. You can use 3 Black Grail Knights instead of one, where one of them is kinda special, with tough keyword plus 1 range and increased cost to 80 ducats. So I came up with an idea to make 3 different evil knights with corresponding retinues. Making a long story short, I gave each knight heavy armor and combat helmet, which is kinda obvious because of their look, and each got also unholy trinket to make risky actions a little bit less risky. Different was only offensive equipment. The Executioner, that expensive knight with +1 range, got Putrid shotgun and Black blade. One of the Lamenters became a tank with a greatsword, shield and urn of a bitter ashes, which gives additional defense against range for bearer and friends. Second Lamenter became DPS with Greatsword, Plague Blade and some additional equipment. What about retinues? Well, I chose 2 Black Grail dogs for my DPS knight, 2 thralls with infested rifles, because in that faction thralls can carry ranged weapons, and 1 corpse guard with greatsword and standard armor as a squire for shielded knight. Last 60 points I spent on my last thrall with musical instruments and pistol to increase speed of a Warband a little bit. At that point, list was finished. I got to work. I have few full plate armors in my files, but only one was fitting perfectly for Black Grail knights. Just needed to add some characteristic details like pointy helmet visor. I took helmet from Games Workshop's Steel Rook, don't ask me how I got this, it's forbidden knowledge, and removed few parts from it. In addition, I made characteristic for Black Grail Knight's leg foil. Also picked one of my old swords and made it bigger. After that, added specific equipment like, for example, that shield inspired by Banished Knight's shield from Elden Ring. After that, first knight was finished. To make core of this Warband ready, I needed only to make Plague Blades and Putrid Shotgun, and different poses for remaining models of course. Finish it pretty quickly. I printed this as a solid piece of resin to skip cutting process and gluing. What about retinues? Well, I found these awesome dogs somewhere on Cult's shop and downloaded them for free, link is below. They fit just perfect for Trench Crusade. Look! Original concept arts are so similar to this that I would sin if I wouldn't take them. There is kinda similar story with all trials because I made them based on Free Zombies STLs available like, everywhere. Just needed to make infested rifles a bit different from label rifles carried by trench pilgrims. Here it is. Model based on historical Sharps rifle or Sparks if you think about hand showdown a bit too much. But during whole process the new idea popped in my mind. Technically, Cult of the Grail Knights is a kinda Nurgle faction possessed by various plagues and diseases. Thing is, my Black Grail Knights doesn't really look like that, so I thought that might be cool to make that Warband a little bit different. I would say like cultist at late stage of sickness, with parts of the body almost completely rotten. A bit like, well, undead. So I replaced zombies with skeletons, which I made some time ago, and added similar skelly corpse guard. And voila! Warband ready to print and paint. This time I wanna paint them without oils. There is only few models, so whole process shouldn't be that long, right? First primed everything with white as always. Almost always. Second, I painted all metallic parts on my minis with bronze. After that, did similar base coating for various clothes and finished with a skin tones. Now, I wanted to make each knight different, so chose distinct main color for them. Armored got green, DPS yellow and range purple. This is still grimdark painting style, so I wanted these colors only on some parts of the miniatures, so I made colored lines on armor and of course correspondent colors on retinues. After slapping basic colors, I took brown Vallejo wash and mixed it with Cassandra yellow from Citadel and slapped heavily on all minis. It's highlights time! On colors chosen for specific nights and their retinues I used some kind of trick. I mean, there isn't any special skill required to do that, just an item, a paint to be more specific. For highlighting bright colors on my minis, I usually do not use paints made for miniatures. That was some kind of noob mistake I made long time ago. I just bought in my local art store these paints which are not best for base coating and generally speaking covering big parts, but work well for highlighting. These are acrylics but behave a bit like an oils. They are wet but thick in the same time. It's hard to explain, to be honest. I just love to use them for highlighting because I can take a bit of this paint, smack on part of a miniature and slowly stipple around. Paint does not dry that quickly like typical miniature paint, so yeah, I just like to use them, and the color is also okay. Saturated and bright. Makes excellent contrast with overall grimdark look of my minis. I hope. And there is it. Process technically finished. Thing is, I wasn't really happy about results, so I added few more steps. First, mixed rust pigment with a bit of Cassandra yellow wash and water and slapped heavily on any armor. After that, I took metallic color and stippled at the edges and some flat surfaces to make that rust left mainly in the recesses. It look way better now, I think, but whole process took some time, so I cannot really call it low time and low effort. So I printed one night again, primed him with a black this time and slapped on him dark metallic paint, highlighted with a brighter metallic. Don't care about clothes yet. After that, slapped brown Vallejo wash on whole miniature. And then made a rust wash, pigment mixed with Cassandra yellow and water. Used heavily on whole miniature. Now it's time for light dry brushing with dark metallic and some stippling with bright metallic. And there were only 2 steps left, painting clothes with brown and main color. I just made colorful some of the clothes leaving whole armor rusted. And that was really quick and easy, took me like, don't know, 15 minutes? Maybe 20. And there is it, another Warband for Trench Crusade ready to play. Now, after long time, I can finally play a game, tabletop game. I can finally make my... Wait. Fuck! Well, that looks really okay for 15 minutes work. I wonder how would look whole Stormcast Eternal's army made only of these guys. Oh well, that's a pity, because for my Stormcast I already have another idea.